Arlia Hoffman, it is a thrill to have you come and talk to the people who are participating in this Good Vibe Challenge. For our beloved viewers, I want you to know that Arlia is in Georgia, outside of Atlanta. Arlia, how would you describe the work you're doing in the world these days?
I work with women. My role is to support them in their unfolding and their awakening, and the vehicles I've been given for that are personal mentoring and counseling, and been doing that for a decade, and also the Women's Sanctuary, which includes Women's Temple practice, which is a sacred practice, sacred embodied spiritual practice for women. And that's very near and dear to my heart.
That sounds very intriguing. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. Women's stories have not been told. They haven't had a place to tell their stories. And our stories live in our bodies. So, historically, spiritual practice, whatever the religion, unless you go back to some of the indigenous tribes and matrilineal societies, they haven't been sourced in the body or included embodied practice. So it's something that we are reclaiming for ourselves, and to have a sacred space to experience what is here for you in this moment, what stories live in your body and in your awareness. It's an incredibly powerful practice for women who have never experienced it before. And the other piece is sisterhood. Sisterhood is not a word that we even are conscious of in our society, and it's incredibly vital to women. So it gives women a safe space to be with themselves and be with each other and learn what it means to honor yourself and honor the woman in front of you and experience that sacred connection of our souls and our spirits, and however we define that, with the divine within, with the divine wherever we source it, and seeing the divine in each other. I've had women tell me, I didn't know how much I needed this. And so we're rediscovering what it is to have a sacred experience within ourselves and with each others.
That's beautiful. And it's especially pertinent. I'm going to say a little disclaimer right now. I did not coach Arlia to say any of what she just said. But
no, it is just that our paths are so aligned, even though we haven't had very much time in real life to talk ever, but we just know that. And I notice, that your work seems to be focused on sisterhood.
It's very definitely focused on sisterhood because for several reasons. One, this is what has helped me in the most difficult times of my life. Was having a cluster. Sometimes it's 2 or 3, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's more, but they're women that I know I can rely on.
Yeah.
Who comfort me, who give me insight, because when you're so close to a situation, you can't see everything. Mm-hmm. So someone who loves you, who is outside that, can give you more objective advice and maybe even offer alternative behaviors to help you deal with that. So that's one of the reasons for the follow-on to the 31-day Good Vibe Challenge. Mm-hmm. The Strategic Sisterhood of Divine Disorder is the ongoing project. And it's exactly what you've talked about. It's for women. These are not wimpy gals. These are women who have done their work, who are doing their work, who are expanding in the world. Yep. And when we work individually, we struggle a little bit to find the path or to stay on it.
Absolutely.
But when we're together, it's so clear. We help.
What I have found is when I'm in working alone, it's harder for me to recognize the places where I have expanded, I've grown, to trust myself and to trust the knowing that I'm getting. And sisters mirror that for me. It's like, oh no, do you realize what you just said? Or do you understand what this experience, as you're saying it, what I see in this experience? And it's been incredible. And I'll just add that, whoever romantic partners we have in our lives, they're very valuable, but there's a particularly precious relationship with a sister that can sometimes transcend that into places our partners may not be able to go. It's
right.
It's a very unique relationship.
It's a beautiful one, and it's sourced in the divine feminine, in Mother God, Gaia, whatever
Yes.
you want to call her. And it's a different way of being in the world. It's a spiral instead of a line.
Exactly.
It's collaboration instead of competition. And this is in spite of the fact that many women have been misguided into trying to be more male.
Mm-hmm.
And the urge to be with the feminine remains, even when mentally it's lost. It's built into our DNA. Now, I'm excited that we have this sisterhood going.
Yes, I am thrilled that it is. I'm seeing it take hold in so many parts of the world. And you mentioned I'm in Georgia. I was trained in these practices in California at the Awakening Women's Institute, where those practices are very well developed, and they're well developed in other parts of the world. But here in the Southeast, not so much. And it feels really vitally important to bring that model of sisterhood and spiritual practice to the women who might not have even heard it before. There's a particular resonance. This is kind of based in the yoga traditions, the work that we do. And, definitely the yoga practices are originally sourced in spiritual practice and also through embodied practices.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a different aspect of it, where we really dive into the feminine, and those are more of a masculine structure. But in women's temples, it becomes all about the flow of the feminine, just to allow your experience to inform what you're doing and how you're interacting. And that feminine flow is it's critical for who we are.
It is critical, and it's something I think we have to relearn, because
Exactly.
Our world has worked so hard to defend itself against the feminine, including inside of us. So,
and I'm sorry, I'm just kind of, I'm trailing off on these trains of thoughts, but that's where I was going with it, was that the masculine for us is it's the water we're swimming in.
mm-hmm.
So it's so unconscious that it is taking specific methods and conscious work to rebalance that within ourselves and re-embrace the feminine.
That's exactly how I experience it as well. And to take a spiritual technology, if you will, into a community that is unfamiliar with it,
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit challenging. How
It
do
is.
you manage that?
As with our own personal spiritual practice, as with mine, I just keep showing up, because I do it for me. It is my spiritual practice. So, in the early days, sometimes nobody would show up, or 2 or 3 would show up. And regardless, temple is open and practice is happening, regardless of who shows up. And those who do immediately know if it resonates with them or not.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women are afraid of sisterhood. They're afraid of being vulnerable with each other, and just being vulnerable in the midst of each other. Yeah. And so it's a process, but the women who get it, and they're like, oh, I desperately need this, or this meets a need for me. Yeah. So, I've had for the last couple of years, I've had a temple meeting in a neighboring town, and it was a core of 8 to 10 women who got it, and they were so faithful to it because they realized it met a need in their heart. So it's, it can be challenging. There are women who will not want to go there. But for the women with the courage to say, I'm going to show up and see what is here for me, and trust that there's something here for me within myself and with my connections with other women, they'll reap incredible benefits from that.
Do you find that there are many of our sisters who are out of touch even with their own sensuality, their sexuality?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I consider this a step in the direction of being reconnected with yourself. We will do some gentle work with our feminine essence or with our wombs, with our sexuality, just gently within ourselves, and that just to help reconnect with ourselves and to experience what is there for us. Women have a multitude of experiences, from the sublime to the traumatic. And, temple is not a place for therapy, but it is a place to be gentle with yourself and to work with those in whatever way the divine might lead you. But it's always to create a safe container for the way women work with their own bodies and selves and with each other. And I can't tell you how many times I've had this, this sacred container give me the personal safety to go into those very vulnerable places where there may be trauma or pain or joy or bliss that I haven't been able to access before or felt safe enough to access.
Do you find also that sometimes we're as afraid of the joy and bliss as we are of the pain and sorrow?
Absolutely. What is it? Where was it? I read that joy is, it may have been Brene Brown. He said, we are more afraid of joy than anything else. And so, when blissful, joyful experiences come to us, the easiest thing to do is to push them away because it's terrifying. We are so trained to misery or pain or struggle that bliss and ease feel foreign to us. Yeah. So it takes some real presence to stay with it. And it's one of the things we do is we stay with a feeling, allow it to work through us and flow through us, detach from the story and be with it. And there's absolutely that type of connection with sisterhood and embodied practices bring up a lot of joy. Yes. And hopefully women are courageous enough to stay with it.
Well, the ones who are here, and we have some lovely men in this group too, but most of our good vibers are women. And that's fairly typical, as we know, because women are more inherently spiritual, and we seem to have a deeper craving for intimacy. And sometimes that's a deeper craving for intimacy with ourselves and with the divine within us.
Absolutely.
And that fear of joy, that fear of receiving the good stuff, I think is related to fear of being bigger, fear of being whole, fear of taking leadership. And that's very much what we're working on this month, is to how do we raise our vibration? What is it that keeps our vibration low? How do we experience that in our bodies? And how do we release that so we can raise our vibration to the places that ecstasy and flow and joy and fulfillment live?
I think that's about 10 questions. They'll take about 3 days to answer.
Sorry.
Fantastic questions. As I was thinking about how I personally raise my vibration, I live in ceremony all the time. It's just how I'm wired. So my main connection to that is music. It's one of the reasons I love facilitating temples, because we use music to help align our vibrations. So I primarily use music, and I definitely use meditation. I require a good bit of solitude and silence, and so that's another tool of mine. And then I do a lot of reading. I'm always doing reading and doing astrology reading, spiritual reading. That works for me. But I'm a Capricorn, so I have this real hard structure, perfectionist streak, and I can be very emotional. So, I have all the same voices in my head that everybody else does of unworthiness and the self-doubt. And I have found like my main task is to get a little space from that voice. And for me, that comes through music and meditation and the temple practices, so that voice it may not ever go away, but that's not me. That's not who I am. So I look for the practices that help me ground in my own divine inner person, because we all are body divine. Mm-hmm. Like we are God and Goddess manifest. So it's there. It's just, can we remember that there's a connection there, and that we are not just all these voices going on in the head. So I get a little space from those voices of self-doubt. And the other piece for me personally is I was raised Christian, and about 16, 17 years ago, started the spiritual growth process that kind of led me into work with the goddess and the divine feminine. And I am finding now personally that I'm coming back to the space in the middle. I did a retreat recently, a meditation retreat at a Jesuit retreat facility. And I've been reading a lot about Jesuit spirituality and how that's reimagined for women of faith. So for me, it's about reimagining the divine as beyond gender, and yet personally inhabiting my space, my energy, and is me. Where do me and the divine begin or end? Not knowing where I end and God begins is in the flow of the divine. Yes. And so what came out of that retreat for me was this extraordinarily deep sense of love, and this being grounded in love. And what I would call divine love would be our actual daily experience. Like we're here, we're surrounded by Mama Gaia and the four-leggeds and the two-leggeds and this standing peoples, the trees. So all of those, to me, are proof that we are grounded and supported in love. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we relate with each other, to me, that's the grounding of love in my life. So that kind of well of love that opened up within me is my grounding. And okay, I could go on for days about that, but so the vibration for me is all of those practices. It is how my own perspective expands into who's the divine and who am I in relationship to the divine. And I had a point and I've already lost it. I was going someplace. Okay. And the last piece for me is the small inner voice. What you would call your intuition or your soul. To me, that is the intersection of me and the divine. That's where the divine really speaks to me. And I guess my main practice these days is listening to that still small voice, because that's where the magic happens. That's where the flow happens. Mm-hmm. I can cite multiple times a day where, the most mundane things, like, what am I going to have for lunch? Why don't you, get that dish out of the refrigerator and put it in the frying pan. Okay, add some apples. Okay, this was my lunch. Add some onions. Okay, this is a weird combination, but I'm listening, and it turns out to be a magical lunch. I mean, they're just so basic. Mm-hmm. But that kind of magic leads to the bigger magic of, why would I go to a Jesuit retreat center for a meditation retreat? That, 6 months ago, that would have been outside of really my realm of thinking. But it created magic and change for me because I took that leap of faith and listened to the voice.
Yeah. And intuition is a requirement for this level of spiritual growth.
Absolutely. It is. It is.
And I think I'm really glad that you talked about the process of bringing you here and crossing over, because in my view, all genuine paths lead to source. I describe myself
Yes.
as a pagan who loves Jesus. I grew up in the Presbyterian church. My granddaddy was a preacher. And I remember running around that little church happy as a clam because Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit were there with me, and I could feel how much they loved me. There was no question about it. Now, over the course of time, I moved out of the organization, but I never left behind Jesus. And the Christ consciousness is gender neutral. Mary Magdalene is as much a part of Jesus Christ as he was himself. The Holy Spirit is the feminine face of God, the Shekinah glory.
Yes.
It's been distorted, but that doesn't change the underlying truth. And the truth.
Absolutely. You and I haven't talked about this, but I almost have the exact same history as being the daughter of a minister and really clinging to, throughout my childhood, the messages of love and unity, and that's what, and so in the process of my own spiritual awakening, I had to let go of all of that and go, well, what's left? What's left is my relationship with Jesus. Yeah. And as the divine masculine, some say he even embodies the divine feminine. I think it's just, why would you even try to separate all of it?
Exactly.
So, it's been incredible. And I think, moving in the temple work, we focus a lot on whatever energies support our beingness. So it could be Hindu goddesses, it could be Celtic goddesses. And occasionally I've thrown, I've invited Jesus, but typically in those populations, people may be either very comfortable with Jesus or very uncomfortable with Jesus. So my work is headed towards whatever divine energy wants to support us in our connection with the divine is who I'm gonna invite. And so it's going to be a really interesting ride to see how we, weave all of those energies, Mary Magdalene and the Christ, and Kali and Durga and Virgin de Guadalupe, all those.
And White Buffalo Calf Woman.
Yes.
Oshun. Yamaya, all of them.
Lilith and the spirits that's attached to the stars and the planets. We just, it is as endless as source itself.
Exactly.
The possibilities for connection.
And I think these are all avatars that are given to us. They're different aspects of the divine, so that we have so many choices of which aspect of the divine we can relate to, that there's no excuse for us not to open ourselves up and see.
Yes.
And at the same time, we are each an aspect of the divine. And that's why sisterhood is so powerful. It helps us to support each other, encourage each other, challenge each other. So,
we become mirrors for each other of the divine in our own particular manifestation.
Exactly. And everything that we do, even if it's alone, if we're doing solitary work, that ripples out into the multiverse, and it affects people in a positive way.
Absolutely.
As we heal ourselves, we're healing our lineage backwards and forwards. And we
absolutely
see the changes in the family members around us.
It does. I've seen, I honestly feel like, I agree. My own personal work has impacted my ancestors. My mother, who is still living, but her mother and in that early work. Her mother, who's passed, came to me as a guide. My mother is currently in her transition process. And at the same time, I've been doing some ancestor work. So there's this weaving of the seen and the unseen world, impacting me and me impacting them. And that impacts, my children and that those ripples. We can't ever underestimate the value of our own work individually to the cosmos.
Exactly. And so that's why I'm going to say thank you, Arlia, for doing your work. And thank you to all my good vibers. And what we're talking about is the process that we're in of having a different reality revealed to us than the one we've been programmed to accept. We've been doing meditations on Sunday, 30-minute. Yesterday was a guided visualization, and it was about realizing there's no there.
Mm-hmm.
There's something out there because we live in a third dimensional reality that is based on free will and polarity. So the very fact that we think there's a location is linear thinking. And what the guides and the teachers are explaining to us now is it's all right here.
Mm-hmm.
Past, the future, whatever's distant, whatever's internal, it's all part of us. It's inside us and our souls and our cellular memory.
With And I think we're being called to hold that tension of, yes, here we are still in a 3D with time and the and duality.
Yes.
And it is not who we are. And I think those who are awake can hold both of those and know that here we are in it and it is not real, and we can be more connected to what is real.
Exactly. And that's where the ecstasy is. That's where the bliss of creation and of being in the process is so much more layered than, hold on, sorry. Technology. Let me get back to my thought here now. What has comforted me is that recently, within the last even year or so, I have become aware of how much more layered and complicated our whole reality is, how much more it is than we know. It's bigger than our minds can comprehend, even if we're not being affected by the programming that has said, that's just your imagination. It's not real. Don't pay any attention. You can't listen to the voices in your head. If you do, we're going to pop you in a mental hospital. There's all sorts of attempts for us not to trust. So let's take a minute and tell people how we see human beings as spirits on the planet, and especially women in these days of transition where we're trying to reestablish a balance between our inner masculine and inner feminine.
Well, I posted something on Facebook the other day. I said we contain multitudes, and my training is in depth psychology. So for me, the all the voices and the beings we talk about are real.
Yes,
they're real, and they are all aspects of the divine, and they are real. And all the voices in our head are real to a degree. And so we, standing in our sovereignty, can be centered in the midst of those voices and discern, which voices are useful and which are beneficial and which aren't. And one of those voices is the divine masculine. Now, it takes some development to be able to trust that voice and to strengthen the divine feminine so that they are working together. In women, the divine feminine would be on lead and the divine masculine is supporting her. but those, I forgot where we were going with this, but those, it is about trusting those and knowing that collectively your own reality is more trustworthy than the external reality.
Exactly.
And that's where sisterhood comes in, to help us discern those voices and test them and trust ourselves and get the mirroring that sisters help us with.
Yes. Because we are multidimensional beings. We have a soul, but our soul is not in any way contained either in our body or even in this third dimensional reality. We exist
Yes.
in 2 dimensions, and who we are in another dimension influences who we are in this one, and vice versa. And as I was listening to your description, I was thinking, what is different about Jesus as a bridegroom or a husband than he presented? If you read the words of Jesus, he's always honoring the feminine. He's gentle, he's forgiving, he's never abusive, he never pulls power cards. In other words, he's not trying to dominate. He's encouraging and celebrating the expression of femininity.
And he's always honoring the inner experience. The kingdom of heaven is within. It's always within and always has been within. And, giving ourselves the permission to be holy, to be whole, opens the door to that experience of us as holy, sacred beings and multidimensional beings, and being safe with that. I know a lot of people who would be really afraid of opening up to the knowledge or the awareness of themselves in other dimensions or timelines. And so that's where the trust comes in of centering within yourself and grounding in yourself, whatever practices help you with that.
Yes, I think that is a critical point, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper with that, because we have to learn to trust ourselves. There have been so many times as in our childhood, in our lifelines, when we have been taught to ignore or discount or even ridicule our own experience. So when I started on this path, one of the things that happened to me, how synchronous experiences happen all the time. So I'm in an airport, I'm a writer and a reader, so I can't walk past a bookstore without taking a look. And I don't even remember what the name of the book was or who wrote it. I think it was Covey Jr. or somebody like that. But the whole point was, keep your word to yourself. So if you decide you want to work on your health, you create a program that you can stick to. You don't say, I'm going to get up every morning and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm not going to eat anything celery. And of course you can't keep that. So as you mature, you learn to create a structure that actually works.
Yes.
And you can trust yourself not to overbook. You can trust yourself to say, no, I would love to, but I don't have the energy to do this right now. There's all the ways that when we come into integrity with ourselves, then we come into integrity with everything around us. And guess what? That includes the spiritual world.
Yes, absolutely. And integrity is one of my main lessons and the things that I really help women with, which is we haven't been taught how to listen to and find our own integrity and to stand in it. Those arbitrary rules about, you drink nothing but lemon water before noon or whatever, they're arbitrary unless they really mean something to you and speak to you personally. So, finding what's true for you is essential. I mean, prior to my awakening, I was people pleasing, and I had really denied any truth in my soul for so long that I was broken. And that's what happens if you're not able to hear or listen to your own integrity or even know how to. It can really break your soul. And so the healing is in listening to that inner voice and honoring it, and piece by piece putting together the puzzle of who you are, what has Spirit created you to be and called you to be. And the more you honor that, the more, here we are back into the bliss and the joy in just being who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's created, and being open to all the experiences that are available.
And integrity requires authenticity. Authenticity, which is simply finding out who you really are, what's really true for you, takes courage to trust yourself when somebody else is saying that's not true.
It
So
does.
what's true for you, it's true, whether anybody else agrees or not. And it takes, as a recovering codependent, a recovering people pleaser,
Uh-huh.
when you give from a place of abundance because you have taken care of yourself and you have filled yourself up, it's effortless.
It is. And it takes skill to get there. I've had to learn how, and I help women learn how to say no, thank you, or no, and, or
Yes.
no, just no, or yes to myself.
Yes.
To what is true for me.
Exactly. So what would you like to share with our fellow journeyers and consciously noting what's happening in our vibration? What would you say to somebody who's feeling down in the dumps right now, who is caught in a morass of, oh my God, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. What am I going to do? There's nobody that understands me. There's nobody that believes me. Or even if there is, the world's a mess. How do I deal with this?
Yeah, well, the world is a mess. But it's not hopeless. And it's a mess in only one dimension. It is.
Hold on, say that again.
It is a mess in only one dimension.
Which,
the dimension in front of our eyes.
Exactly. Say more. Keep going. This is great.
If we're only looking at the 3D, it's going to be very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
On some level in the 3D, of course, we can affect some change. But if we're in a place in an unempowered place, an unprivileged place, a place where we are not being given the opportunities that we deserve and require, it can be depressing and challenging. So it requires some other consciousness. It requires an awareness on a different level. One is to remember that the universe, as Abraham Hicks says, is always conspiring in our favor.
Okay, this is a big one. Let's lean on this. Okay.
I believe the universe is fundamentally a universe of love.
Yes.
We are created we swim in, we are the very fiber of consciousness is love and light. Light is love, love is light. So we cannot escape the fact that we are light and love. Even when it feels horrible and we are absolutely under a rock and, either situationally depressed or clinically depressed or without hope in the 3D, there is always love and hope on the spiritual plane and in the essence of who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's challenging. It's challenging to access that, but when life is hard. And that's where those very basic practices come back to us. Like self-care 101, drink your water, get enough sleep, find a friend, find somebody who can speak truth and love to you and support each other, the sisterhood or a brotherhood or a family member. Like the basics of connection remind us of who we are and keep us connected to that. So it's the basics of loving connection and also remembering that everything you think is not true. Like all of those thoughts and feelings, they flow through you, but they are not the truth of who you are.
Exactly.
And finding some way to ground in that truth gets us through the hard times. Now, in terms of the world is going to hell in the handbasket, well, it sure looks that way, you know. But you have to be discriminating what you pay attention to. Don't look away, as Glennon Doyle says. You don't look away. Other people say, I know she's one of them. You don't look away. You sit with and hold the pain that is the human experience and is the pain and the trauma that is happening in the world. It's there. And from this place of us being love and light, there are things that we can do within our power, whatever is true and authentic for us that we can give, whether it's our smile in the grocery store or you know, picking up litter so that you leave no trace, or volunteering at the hospice. I mean, whatever is true for you in your ability is something that you can give. And I know a lot of times when I'm stuck in a mental spiral or an emotional spiral or very down, it's what can I do to just a little bit get out of myself and either go experience nature, connect with someone else, or give from whatever I have to give. You know, it's not rocket science. It is not rocket science. It's about human connection.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Sometimes because it's simple and we have heard about it a lot, we think we discount it or we don't have time for it. Because while it's simple, it's not necessarily easy. And I'd like to also point out that getting out into nature and really connecting with nature. One of the disservices that has been done to humans is the notion somehow got created that we're separate from nature, that we're outside of it. It's over there and we're over here. And guess what, folks? That's a total delusion. We are nature.
We are. Yes.
Everything on this planet has been created to support human life. Goddess only knows why. But the air is the right mix. We have water. Every plant seems to be either food or medicine. Animals sacrifice themselves for our diets.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an incredible space in which humans have been given to evolve. And energy does not hurt Earth. So if you have dense, heavy energy that is dragging you down, go outside, hug a tree and let it go into the tree. Lie on the earth and let it go into the earth because it's not hurting her. Hucha is damaging only for humans, and we're the only beings who created these lower vibration emotions that keep us from rising closer into the divine.
Absolutely. You know, as I've been taught, you know, the earth and the trees and the stones, they are all older and more ancient than we are and are happy to receive whatever energy we'd like to get rid of.
Exactly.
So, yes.
And they teach us.
They do.
There's so much to learn from all the sentient beings, no matter what form they take.
They've been my best teachers in terms of integrity. You know, an oak tree is not a pine tree. It's an oak tree. That's what it was born to be, and that's who it's going to be, and it's not going to waver from that because that's what it has to do. And they're perfect in their integrity and their beingness.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that we learn from our pets, from our animals. That they just are the best dogs and cats and birds and lizards they can possibly be. They're not trying to compete with each other, or, you know, except on the superficial. That's my bone level.
That's right, exactly.
but that's being a dog. And, you know, a cat catches a bird because that's being a cat. I release the bird because that's being a human. Mm-hmm. so it's partly getting clear about what it means to be human, especially as what it means to be human is changing.
Yes.
Even our bodies.
Go ahead.
Programmed from being carbon based to being crystalline based.
Oh, yeah.
We can hold more light and more love and be channels of more light and love as our physical reality is changing.
Yeah, I think as our physical reality is changing and the consciousness around us is shifting, it's becoming easier to see what we've been programmed to believe about who we are and what our capabilities are. Mm-hmm. And so the more we can open up to remembering and reclaiming who we were created to be, it will change us and everything around us. It is changing everything around us.
It is, and it's changing very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's changing so fast that if we try to think about it too much, we go into overwhelm. So one of the things that we're coaching each other about in our Good Vibe Challenge is observe, notice, acknowledge, but release.
Yes.
The process is working us. We're showing up for the process, but we didn't start it and we can't complete it. Not alone.
No, and nor can we control it. Just have to be able to stay grounded and be in the flow.
So can you describe what you see as where the process is taking us?
Ooh. No. I would not deign to know where we're going. But energetically, I feel us moving towards a reality where we are, we have access to all of who we are and are able to inhabit it and live it and be it. Mm-hmm. And that means, being relational creatures, being in relationship with each other in the utmost of love and integrity, and supporting each other in a mutually supporting society so that everyone is equal. Seems like that's a 3D word. Everyone is sovereign and interconnected and all working together for the highest good. That doesn't mean we're then carbon copies of each other. We're still very individual, and we all still may have very different belief systems. But within that, we can hold that tension of, yes, you're different from me, and I honor you and your differences and your different belief system. No matter who you are, we are co-creative beings of this reality. And so I feel that we have, some would say we've ascended. I feel like that consciousness, that 5D consciousness came online last year, and I, for one, am really feeling it layered on top of the 3D, mm-hmm. so that it gets easier to swim back and forth. Yes. I can attend to the 3D, but I'm more often operating a little bit above it and more easily able to access my intuition and that self-care and the integrity and the authenticity. All those pieces are a little bit more accessible, and I'm able to walk in them and then understand, how I, as a divine being in a 5D consciousness, how I interact and impact the 3D and how I change myself and my surroundings. So it's as you say, that multi-layered dimensionality where it's easier to access now. And I feel like anybody who's not yet feeling it, once they say, okay, I want to shift my vibration to something a little higher, I want to be able to access that, it's right there. Yes. It's now right there for them. So it's not like there are the haves and the have-nots. We all have. It's here. It's a matter of finding your own inner alignment and that inner sweet spot where you're like, okay, this is who I am, and this is where I can just reach for that greater alignment. I'm thinking of Abraham Hicks, who says, find the next better emotion.
Yes.
It's like just that slight scale of what's more true for me? What's more in integrity for me? What's more sacred? What is my inner voice saying? As we said before, it's not hard, but it does take trusting yourself and coming back to center constantly.
Beautifully put. That's a lovely place to end. Arlia, thank you for bringing your wisdom and your insights and your beautiful energy, your beautiful face to our.
Thank you for the invitation. This has been lovely.
And please join us on some of the meditations tomorrow at 5:30. We're going to have a wisdom council, because we need to talk about these things. And I love these podcasts and these recordings, but I want to have a chance for people to talk live about what's on their minds. And we'd love
absolutely.
Everyone,
thank you, Barbara,
very much for showing up. And may the love that has bridged Ecuador and Georgia also touch you and make you feel how much you are cherished and adored by the divine and by everybody on the planet. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.